Hey everyone, you're watching The Business of Law, the only web TV show focusing on the challenges and the opportunities facing the legal profession. I'm Lee Pacquiao. We're taking a look at the litigation finance space today. I'm happy to say my guest is the Chief Investment Officer at Bentham IMF, Ralph Sutton. Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the basics. What exactly do you do?
We invest in litigation in a David versus Goliath type of setting. So we're helping small businesses and medium businesses and individuals to fight big fights against well-funded defendants.
And you're an interesting company. You originally started as an Australian concern. You're still an Australian concern, publicly traded, and quite large. Tell us how large.
So by size, we're about 45 professionals across 8 offices. 5 of them are in Australia, 2 in the US, which we've opened in the last 3 years, and 1 we opened last month in London, which will service Europe as well. So we are the largest in terms of our geographic reach, and we've been doing it longer than anyone else. In fact, we invented this industry 13 years ago and won the American Lawyer Magazine Award for one of the top 50 innovators in law.
So what kind of cases do you target?
We target commercial disputes and IP cases. And we're not interested in really anything other than that. We don't do any personal injury, medical malpractice, and so forth. We're looking for company disputes, ideally, where we can make a difference in leveling the playing field.
Why is that? Why stay away from medical malpractice or personal injury?
Yeah, well, first of all, if we were to invest alongside a medical malpractice plaintiff and had to enforce our agreement with them, we'd be effectively having to enforce legal rights against someone who is already a victim. We never want to do that. So we're always looking for a commercial dispute where people are rational and there's been a wrong. In fact, we're looking for really reprehensible conduct on the part of the defendants in a corporate setting.
I see. Makes total sense. Are you at the point where you're working with specific firms and corporations, or is this a thing where you take it on an ad hoc basis?
Well, you can imagine that we get a lot of calls.
Yeah.
But we do target dozens of AmLaw 100 companies, firms, and they come to us and ask us to help design programs for either practice groups or sometimes for their entire firm. And we also invest with medium-sized boutiques that really can make use of our capital in ways that move their needle.
This is fascinating stuff. Can we get nitty-gritty here and talk about how precisely the process works? At what point do you enter into a situation, and when and how do you exit?
Sure. So a client may call, as one did a few days ago, with a real serious dispute against some joint venture partners. This client had done a lot of homework and sent us a really good brief on the dispute and had not yet phoned for a lawyer. So we were able to, and are now, working with some of the lawyers that we like and respect and want to work with to help that client find the right venue, find the right situation to bring that suit, and we will back that suit. We will either help that individual with working capital for his company and or assist with some of the legal fees and costs.
So I guess the big question here is, are you making money?
We are making money. The returns we would take in a case like that vary, but they're between 20 and 35%. In the US, we've now invested in the last 3 years, since we opened our US market, in about 15 cases. This past year, while we don't break out our separate US revenue, unofficially we have 20 million of gross revenue.
So from a market intelligence point of view, how do you get a feel for the market for litigation in the United States and elsewhere? How is it possible to look in the future and project what litigation activity is going to look like? I mean,
so
I'm not even sure that's possible.
It's not possible. What we can do, first, our company was founded because of a need for access to justice in Australia. There's no contingency fees in Australia, and there's adverse cost risk. So you could be responsible for the defendant's fees. And so that was a crying opportunity for litigation finance, someone to take the risk of those adverse fees and pay the lawyers and work closely with the lawyers, and that's what we did. And in the US, there is contingency fees, as you know, and there's many opportunities because the robust nature of our economy means we're 10 times the size of Australia in terms of people and commercial activity. So there's plenty of opportunity here. We opened in London last month after studying Europe and after studying that market because we see tremendous opportunity there as well.
Apart from the United States and London, where globally do you see opportunity coming from next?
What
are the big markets out there?
We are looking in Europe very closely and exploring the Netherlands and Germany. We invest currently in 8 countries, which include all the English-speaking countries, New Zealand, of course Australia and the US, but also South Africa, the UK, and Canada. And well, we haven't actually invested in Canada, but we're looking closely at that market too.
It's fascinating to have this conversation because we're talking about, at essence, 3 large legal markets here: Australia, the United States, and the UK. Out of the 3, the United States, from my vantage point, has the most, I would say, problematic, from your point of view, regulatory scheme. If you were to wake up in the morning and get one wish from the genie for a regulatory change in the way the legal market works in the United States, what would that be?
Lee, that's an easy one. One of the challenges that our industry, which is so young and so early, faces is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and some of the big companies that fund it really do not like the idea that the playing field could be leveled. And so what we're finding is that they are introducing amendments to rules and potentially even legislation to limit the growth of the industry, which is really shocking because what America is based on, its success, is small and medium-sized businesses. And the larger companies are the ones that seem to be doing these reverse mergers to save taxes abroad. But the mom and pops and the medium-sized companies that employ most of America really can't afford the kind of litigation expense that is now everyday fare. And so what litigation funding is trying to do is address that need. So you would hope that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce would see that small and medium-sized businesses are really part of their constituency, and they don't seem to do that, unfortunately.
I don't know if you saw the show we did a couple weeks ago with Fred Levin, the famous plaintiff's attorney in Florida, and he was talking about how the system in the United States, particularly in the South, has changed so dramatically over the past 2 decades to a point where the common man going into court to pursue whatever plaintiff's action they might have, they don't really have a fighting chance anymore. It's just completely skewed because there's been such an influx of burdens and time and money that's required to litigate in the United States.
It's out of control. And we have an advisory panel that just met for the first time last week in Chicago. Steve Sussman, amongst others on our advisory panel, terrific trial lawyer, was explaining that to us as well, which is that the world has shifted so radically to make the expense of litigation overwhelming and overburdening to people, that the system really doesn't work for most of this country. And that's a crisis, although it's not being talked about. I believe that's a crisis. And I often ask my lawyer friends, if you spend 30 or 40 years as a lawyer, do you feel like you'll have changed the system in any small way?
Right.
And that's what we try to do at Bentham.
That's Ralph Sutton, Chief Investment Officer at Bentham IMF. If you'd like to see more of the stuff we're working on, be sure to go check us out online. You can find us at mimesiswebtv.com. There's also a YouTube channel and a Twitter handle under the same name. I'm Lee Packia. Thanks for watching.